the UK was failed. Matt Hancock admits a catalogue of mistakes were made at the start of the pandemic. The former health secretary said the planning for care homes was terrible. It was madness not to quarantine people flying in from China, that the government's focus was on deaths, not stopping the spread of the virus, and that Brexit distracted the pandemic planning.
I'm profoundly sorry for each death that has occurred, and I also understand why for some it will be hard to take that apology from me.
He said he was assured the UK was one of the best in the world at responding to a pandemic, but he was wrong. We'll have the latest on this developing story on the biggest day yet at the COVID inquiry. Also ahead. Every little helps. The supermarket bosses deny profiteering, saying they are trying to keep their prices low. Cricket's shame, the new report that finds racism, sexism and elitism in the sport are widespread and deeply rooted. Lewis Capaldi confirms he'll take a break from touring to adjust to the impact of his Tourette's. And
thank you for being a friend. I want to thank you. Thank you for being
singing with Sting, Tony Christie joins forces to thank carers supporting people with dementia.
So, do you know, it's great to be looking at sitting next to a legend. And he looked at me and says, no, he said, I'm sitting next to a legend. I said, what?
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. Matt Hancock has made admission after admission at the COVID inquiry, signalling a catalogue of mistakes at the start of the pandemic. The former health secretary said it was madness not to quarantine people who came back from China. He said planning to protect people in care homes was terrible, that Brexit diverted attention from pandemic planning, and that the focus in the UK was on deaths, not controlling the spread of the virus. Our political correspondent, Romilly Weeks, is at the inquiry. Romilly, a big morning hearing from one of the key players and several admissions of failure.
Yes, Nina, this was a difficult morning at the inquiry for Matt Hancock, who was Health Secretary both in the lead-up and during the pandemic. Even as he arrived at the inquiry this morning, and he is just about due to leave too, he was confronted by Laura King, whose husband died in a care home during the pandemic, an indication of how difficult the morning was going to get. And during his evidence, he did stop and give an apology directly to the bereaved families.
I'm profoundly sorry for each death that has occurred, and I also understand why for some it will be hard to take that apology from me. I understand that, I get it, but it is honest and heartfelt.
There were admissions of failure, as you say, but in sometimes testy exchanges with the barrister to the inquiry, who had to remind him that it was his job to ask the questions, Mr. Hancock returned time and time again to his central premise that the reason that the UK was not better prepared was that the planning was based on a flawed assumption that deaths in a pandemic could not be prevented, and that's why there wasn't an attempt at early lockdowns or quarantining or mass contact tracing in the initial stages.
We've got to be ready to hit a pandemic hard, that we've got to be able to take action, lockdown action if necessary, that is wider, earlier, more stringent than feels comfortable at the time. And the failure to plan for that was a much bigger flaw in the strategy than the fact that it was targeted at the wrong disease.
Romilly, much of the criticism that Matt Hancock faced at the time as Health Secretary was around care homes. What exactly did he have to say about that?
Yes, this was an ordinary part of the evidence. Mr. Hancock was asked repeated questions about why the adult social care sector was not better prepared. He admitted that at the time of the pandemic, they didn't even know how many care homes were operating or how many people required care. At one point, the counsel to the inquiry asked him, "What was your title, Mr. Hancock, of your department?" It was the Department for Health and Social Care, Mr. Hancock had to admit.
Romilly Weeks, thank you very much. Thank you. The bosses of the big four supermarkets have rejected accusations of profiteering during the cost of living crisis. Senior executives from Tesco, Asda, Morrisons and Sainsbury's were being questioned by MPs over the rising cost of food. The latest figures out today show food inflation has fallen a little, but prices are still nearly 15% higher than a year ago. That is despite wholesale prices beginning to come down. From Westminster, Charlie Frost reports.
Shopping for the basics has never cost more. Food prices eating heavily into already stretched budgets. But while some wholesale costs for retailers are falling, prices on the shelves are still rising. Now the executives of four of the big supermarkets are being asked why, called in front of MPs, accused of failing to pass on savings to consumers and profiteering from people's misery.
We are the most competitive we have ever been. We have not made more profit year on year. We have actually made 7% less profit versus our last financial year. So I think it's important to be clear at the outset on that point, Mr. Chairman.
The public will just look at the numbers I've presented to you, and your group profits have gone up from before the COVID pandemic to now. How can it be possible that you're making hundreds of millions of pounds in additional profit?
I would reiterate the point, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the numbers. Our adjusted operating profit for the group in 2019 were 2.6, and in 2023 they're 2.6 again. So there may be, I don't know, maybe some discrepancies in what we're comparing.
Food inflation reached 14.6% this month, according to the British Retail Consortium, a relatively significant drop from 15.4% in May, while fresh food inflation fell to 15.7%, down from 17.2% last month. But these numbers don't mean prices are falling, just that they're rising more slowly. ITV News has been keeping up with how mum of 8, Hayley Gray, has been coping throughout the cost of living crisis.
I've cut back on literally everything. Everything that you can think of, I've cut back on it. There's nothing else I can cut back on unless I stop buying food. I've already had to not buy so much food and stuff like that, just so I've got enough money for gas and electric.
Supermarkets say they are doing as much as they can, but during questioning there was little support for bringing in enforced price caps, meaning for families like Hayley's, they can only hope the punishing cost of the weekly shop is past its peak. Charlie Frost, ITV News in Westminster.
Nicola Bulley's partner and sister both broke down in tears giving evidence at her inquest this morning. Paul Ansell described her as an incredible mum. Louise Cunningham talked about them planning a spa day shortly before her death in January. Her body was found in a river in Lancashire 3 weeks after she went missing. Our North of England correspondent Rachel Townsend is at the hearing. Rachel, a really difficult morning for Nicky's family.
Yeah, lots of emotion this morning. Nina, as Nicky's sister, partner and her parents all gave evidence. We heard how 2 weeks before Nicky's death, her sister had called an ambulance concerned about Nicky's drinking. She'd also just come off her HRT treatment. The court heard how Nicky had not wanted to engage with her children and had made a comment about not wanting to be here. Well, paramedics and a mental health practitioner visited her home. Nicky was intoxicated, but when asked if she appeared depressed, the mental health practitioner said no. And that event was referred to as by her family as a blip. They say she returned to HRT, stopped drinking and got back to normal quickly. Nicky's GP also told the court there was nothing to suggest she was suicidal. Now, her sister also talked about the dog Willow being Nicky's third child and how she'd never miss her daily walk. The coroner asked her if Nicky was planning to harm herself, do you think she would leave her dog in a field and go? Absolutely not, she replied. There is no way Nicky would leave Willow in a field unattended by choice. Well, Nicky's partner, Paul Ansell, told the court how she was excited for the future. She was rebuilding her career and reaping the rewards. Through the family's legal team, he said Nicky was loved and surrounded by love. She was grateful for every day. She focused on the important things and did the right things by everyone. He then broke down and cried. Well, the senior coroner here has retired to consider his findings. He will deliver them this afternoon.
Rachel Townsend, thank you. The game of cricket has been rocked by a report that concluded racism, sexism and elitism are not only widespread, but deep-rooted. The 2-year investigation found structural and institutional racism continue to exist, that women are treated as subordinates, and nearly 60% of men who play for England went to private schools. The England and Wales Cricket Board says it'll use the shocking findings to reset the game. David Harper has the details.
Cricket is the game that Britain gave to the world. The quintessentially English game has become a huge international obsession. But it would appear not all of cricket's fans around the globe have been made to feel welcome. The Independent Commission for Equity in Cricket was tasked with investigating inclusion and discrimination in the game. Now the Commission's long-awaited report has been released and the findings are damning. The Commission says racism is a serious issue and is widespread. It's also unacknowledged by many running the sport. Particular mention is made of the decline of black cricket. The report goes much further than just racism, though, highlighting the unequal treatment of women. For example, school boys from public schools play at Lord's, but the England women's team have yet to hold a test match there.
I've got to say I'm very shocked. I mean, I did expect there to be problems and issues. I mean, that's why we were set up. We knew that there were issues, but I didn't expect them to be so deep-rooted and widespread. I didn't expect to hear some of the harrowing evidence and testimonies that people gave us across the board, whether that was related to race, gender or class.
The report makes 44 recommendations aimed at delivering equity, diversity and inclusion. Among them, a commitment to be anti-racist and anti-classist, efforts to equalise pay between male and female players, and most importantly for the ECB to give an unqualified public apology for and acknowledgement of the discrimination within cricket.
On behalf of the ECB, on behalf of the broader game of cricket, we certainly offer a heartfelt apology to anybody that has felt excluded.
The ECB board is about to build a plan of action, consulting with people throughout the cricket community to find a way to reset the game. The full details of the reforms and responses to the report are set to be announced within 3 months. David Harper, ITV News.
Millions of families on low incomes are being almost completely priced out of renting a home in England. In some areas, there are no affordable properties whatsoever. New figures shared exclusively with ITV News by the charity Crisis show people who receive housing benefit can afford just 4% of the homes in the private rental sector. Our investigations correspondent Daniel Hewitt is here. Take us through these findings.
Well, Nina, these findings are alarming and it's incredibly worrying and incredibly scary right now if you're on a low income trying to find somewhere to rent. The number of properties affordable and available to you are disappearing by the day. Why is this happening? It's a pretty simple equation. Rents have skyrocketed 11% in England in the last year. In some areas it's much higher, whilst housing benefit, and that's where people receive help to pay their rent, has been frozen since 2020. So what you have is an increasing shortfall between the cost of rent and money coming in to help pay that rent. Let's look through some of the statistics here, and you may be surprised by some of the areas we're talking about. Overall, 4% now, just 4% of rental homes are affordable to someone on housing benefit. That's down from 12% last April. So we've had this collapse in affordability. In some areas, though, it's less than 4%. In fact, it's less than 1%. In Barnsley, 0.9% of properties are affordable. In Mansfield, 0.8%. In Wigan, 0.5%. And in the Ribble Valley in Lancashire, we could not find in our analysis a single home available if you were on housing benefit. Now, we've been speaking to one tenant, Holly, who lives in Thanet. She's a single mum to a 1-year-old. She simply can't find anywhere she can afford to live. She's living on sofas, trying to find somewhere, but she can't. This is what she had to say to us.
Right. I feel like I'm literally trapped in a life that I didn't want. Because no matter what I do, I've applied for over 20 properties in total.
And I mean, how do you think it? Do you see it changing? I mean, what?
I unfortunately don't know. I don't see anything changing unless I physically take myself out of the area.
The government say they are spending £30 billion on housing benefit. They're giving people cost of living payments, an average of £3,300 per household. Crisis, though, another charity say you just have to unfreeze housing benefit here. The gap between what rent is and what help people are getting is now too big, and it's going to drive homelessness even further.
Daniel Hewitt, thank you very much. Thank you. The nurses' strikes are over. Turnout for the vote by members of the Royal College of Nursing failed to reach the 50% threshold. But of those who did vote, an overwhelming 84% voted to continue action. Our deputy political editor, Anushka Asthana, is in Westminster. Anushka, welcome news for a government in need of some.
I mean, very welcome news. Not that many months ago, nursing strikes was what was causing one of the biggest headaches in Downing Street. They knew that there was a lot of public sympathy for nurses, and speaking to people in Downing Street, they are very relieved by this result today. The RCN leadership are saying they are disappointed, but clearly they didn't have the numbers, and so it will stop. They did actually negotiate the deal that the government offered NHS workers apart from doctors and dentists, and that deal will now go ahead for RCN members. They've already got a one-off payment in the last few days, but they'll get a 5% increase next year. Now, that said, there are still really big headaches here for the government. In terms of nurses, over 100,000 still voted to continue striking. So there's a lot of angry sentiment, although there won't be strikes. But look, Rishi Sunak's party has to defend itself in 3 by-elections on the 20th of July. In the run-up to that, there will be a 5-day walkout from junior doctors. Later today, senior doctors, consultants will vote, or will get the results of their vote to strike. They could be out on election day itself on the 20th of July. Railway workers are also going to be out on the 20th of July, among other days, and teachers are out for 2 days in July. Now, sources say to me that teachers would probably accept what the pay review body is suggesting for them, a 6.5% increase for next year, but there's a suggestion the government won't go for that, and so things could get more difficult.
Anushka, thank you very much. Lewis Capaldi has confirmed he'll be taking a break from touring for the foreseeable future. The singer-songwriter says he's still learning to adjust to the impact of his Tourette's syndrome. Our entertainment reporter Rishi Davda is here. For those who saw him at Glastonbury at the weekend, this news today won't come as much of a surprise, will it? For his legions of fans.
No, it's not a big surprise. Glastonbury was Lewis's first show back in about 3 weeks. He took some time off to look after his well-being, but it's not the comeback he would have wanted. He told us last year that he had Tourette's and on Saturday struggled with his tics, the involuntary movements that come as a byproduct of the condition. He also started to lose his voice, but the crowd were very much behind him and sang his songs. We can take a listen to that now. It wasn't a very emotional performance. I was there and the crowd sang as much as they could. Some were even in tears, but Lewis has said he'll take a break from touring for the foreseeable future, adding, "The truth is I'm still learning to adjust to the impact of my Tourette's, and on Saturday it became obvious that I needed to spend more time getting my mental and physical health in order so I can keep doing everything I love for a long time to come." Well, Lewis has nearly 30 shows scheduled between now and the end of the year. He's apologised to ticket holders but said he needs to feel well to perform at the level they deserve.
We all wish him well. Rishi Davda, thank you very much. Thank you. Finally, the star singer who has recorded a new song to thank the nation's carers. Tony Christie's special rendition of Thank You for Being a Friend is in collaboration with the likes of Sting and Nile Rodgers for Music for Dementia. He revealed he had the condition earlier this year and says carers never get mentioned. Chloe Keedy has more.
Thank you for being a friend.
Tony Christie's dementia diagnosis hasn't stopped him from singing.
Thank you for being a friend.
In fact, he says his voice is better than ever, and he's using it to say thank you to a group of people he says don't hear those words enough.
It's basically for the carers, because they never get mentioned. It's to raise the awareness of what the carers do for dementia, helping dementia.
It's not the first time he's teamed up with celebrity friends for a charity single.
I'm not ashamed to say.
This time he's doing it for Music for Dementia, ahead of Thank You Day, which is on Sunday. And he's been joined by a few other famous faces, including Sting.
Thank you to Tony for being a friend.
We sat together, and I said, you know, it's great to be looking at sitting next to a legend. And he looked at me and says, no, he says, I'm sitting next to a legend. I said, what?
Thank you for being a friend. I want to thank you. Thank you for...
But this is all about the unsung legends, like Jez, who cares for people living with dementia. He won a competition to sing with Tony on the new recording.
And I was told, can you come to London on Sunday and sing? I thought, well, go on then.
And are you a singer anyway?
Yes, when I'm in the shower. But other than that, no.
But that's not strictly true, because singing is actually part of his job.
It is the single most important tool that we have. We use it all the time. From the moment that person gets up, we're assisting them to get washed and dressed. We're singing, they're singing back. It's great.
Thank you for being a friend.
Chloe Keedy, ITV News.
And that's all from us for now. Mary's here at 6:30 from everybody on today's Lunchtime team. Bye-bye.